Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about The Surge for the PlayStation 4. This title was sent to me by Focus Home Interactive so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. Now, before we get started, let me just let you guys know there's not going to be any spoilers in this video. All of the footage that I'm going to be showing is of the very first level. It's just going to be my character running around the first level, killing random dudes, just so that you guys get an idea of what the combat looks like, what the UI looks like, what the action looks like, and all that stuff. No real spoilers or boss fights are going to be shown here, because I know that a lot of you guys like to go into these games pretty much blind, so I'm just respecting your wishes there. Anyway, if I had to describe The Surge in one quick sentence, what would I say? I would say Dark Souls in the future on steroids, even though I kind of find that to be not really appropriate because there's so much more to this title than just Dark Souls. But, you know, it's just that quick one-liner that people are looking for to kind of set the stage as to what we're going to be talking about here. Now, as per usual with all my reviews, we're going to start on the visuals, then we're going to go to sound, story, and gameplay. So let's begin. Now, in terms of visuals, I think that this particular title looks really good. And more importantly than just looking good, it manages to create this futuristic setting, and it manages to make it somewhat believable. Not only believable, but also the way that the levels are designed, like, you will get lost in these levels. Like, I'm already talking about level design because I'm just reminding myself of how good everything looked. But we're going to be talking more about level design when we get to the gameplay portion of it. But let me just tell you, like, it is very, very immersive, very believable, and on top of it, it also animates really good, particularly with those really sweet execution moves that I'm sure you guys have seen. And I know some of you guys are going to say, oh, I've seen some that look really glitchy and all this other stuff. It's like, come on. These are dynamic things that are going to happen on these crazy levels. Who knows? Sometimes a barrel will show up in the middle of the execution move because you happen to kill someone who was next to a barrel. So yes, I know that sometimes this thing will glitch out, but it's impossible to make a system like this that is not going to sometimes in the middle of an execution move something weird's going to happen. I have to say, personally, I really like it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Now, another really cool thing about the visuals that is specific to the PlayStation 4, because everything that I will be talking about on this video is going to relate to the PlayStation 4 version, because that is the version that I've been playing. I don't know, I believe it's also well optimized for the PC, but I didn't really get to test that, so just letting you guys know. But this really cool feature that I saw on the PlayStation 4 is the quality versus performance. Now, we've seen this before in Neo, and in my opinion, it's a great feature to have. It lets players pick whether they want to have 30 FPS with the best possible visuals that the console can deliver, or if they want to have 60 FPS with slightly more compromised visuals. Personally, I played the whole thing in performance mode, and I didn't see a single problem with the visuals. The game still looked pretty damn good to me. Sure, whenever you get the zoom in, particularly when you're taking the exo lifts and stuff, because the camera really zooms into your character, whenever that happens, you will see that some of the textures, they don't look amazing because it's zoomed in all the way that all you see is your character. But it's like whenever you're actually playing the game in the middle of combat, in the middle of the action, the 60 FPS more than makes up for whatever flaws you might encounter on the texture side of things. And to be honest, I wouldn't even complain about any of that. I think the game just looked great, even in performance mode. Again, personal opinion. Now let's move on to sound. Now, in terms of sound, I thought the sounds were pretty good, particularly the impact sounds whenever you hit a monster, whenever there's those cool execution moves like the sounds of the flesh getting separated from the rest of the body, so the fleshy sounds, the metal sounds of stuff hitting on other stuff, so like the different weapons, the sounds of the bosses, all of that stuff I thought was pretty good, as well as the pneumatic / hydraulic sounds that you get from both your exosuit as well as the enemy's exosuit from just moving around. Whenever you dodge, there's like this sound that you get, which makes the whole experience more believable as far as I'm concerned. Coupled together with some really cool ambient sounds for whenever you're in a server room or whenever you're in a production line and you can hear the robots and all of the noises that stuff makes. All of that was spot on, just straight up as good as it can get to make this whole environment believable, which coupled together with the good visuals, like I said earlier, made the whole experience very immersing from both a visual as well as a sound standpoint. In terms of the music I never really felt was like front and center for this title. I always felt the music was more of a, just kind of like to set the tone. So like you will go into a tunnel sometimes, which happens to be somewhat dark, and they will start some tension building music that will kind of remind you. It almost looks like you're in a terror game in some of those moments, or a horror game, something like that. Which is pretty cool because it kind of like shifts gears on you sometimes when you're just used to running in, killing people, and then all of a sudden it shifts gears to you and it feels a little bit more terrifying, a little bit more horror-like. And they do a couple of things with the gameplay to kind of play to the advantage of those specific moments, and that works pretty good. Obviously, during the boss fights, you have the epic type of music that you expect. So music overall was also pretty good, but it didn't really stand out to me as much as the sound, in my opinion. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about the story. I didn't get most of it. Yeah, I gotta be honest. I was so focused on the gameplay that a lot of the times I would miss on certain story beats, because there's these audio logs, right, that you can kind of pick up and you can listen to them as you are moving through the level. So I would try and do that. So I'd pick up audio logs and then I would continue on my adventure. But the thing is, the combat later down the line becomes so punishing that it was very hard for me to focus on what those audio logs were saying. And I was mostly just focusing on the combat. And then by the time the audio log was over, I would be like, I'm not sure I understood what the hell that was about. So pro tip, if you're trying to understand fully the extent of the story of this game, in my opinion, whenever you get an audio log, do not continue moving. Just sit down, listen to the audio log so that you can understand. To give you guys a basic idea of the plot, and everything that I'm about to say happens within the first 10 minutes or so of the game. Your character begins as a cripple who joins this organization called Creo, who then outfit him with an exoskeleton, and so that your character is kind of like able to walk again. But during that particular procedure where your character is outfitted with an exoskeleton, something goes terribly bad at the organization, and then you are left to kind of like fend for yourself because you're ditched somewhere to be disposed of, and you just kind of like have to figure out what the hell happened. And somehow what happened that Creo is going to have some major impact into the future of humanity, and you're left to figure out all of these things by interacting with the different NPCs that you find throughout the game, listening to these audio logs and all of these other things that you encounter throughout to kind of like understand what the story is like. So there's not some points of the game, you all like at the very start it's very narrative driven, but later down the line it is not nearly as narrative driven as you would expect, and it becomes kind of like more Dark Souls storytelling type. And to be completely honest, I'm not entirely sure that works in its favor. Like, in a way, I would almost rather have the style of gameplay that they have, but I would almost rather them give me a more narrative-driven experience for this title, because I actually thought the story was pretty interesting up until the points where I was able to understand it, and then I think I got a basic idea of what was happening by the end of the game, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure that my idea is correct, and I'm going to have to be looking up online a bunch of stuff for the story. Now, I know that some of you guys might be wondering, so what's the deal with these melee weapons? Because, like, it's the future. Shouldn't they have, like, laser guns and all these other things? And let me just tell you, there is a narrative justification as to why most of the weapons that your character is using are melee. Actually, all of the weapons that you're using are melee. There is a justification for that, and you will understand if you play the game. Because that was something that personally I always thought was kind of weird. The fact that we're in the future, why don't we have guns and lasers and stuff? And there are some lasers and other things that you will see. But most of the combat that you will do is going to be with melee. And again, there's a good justification for that. Now, there are several side stories which feels, again, very much in tune with what we've seen in Dark Souls. Like, you'll encounter these characters, and if you don't do stuff to help them out as you progress through the game, that those particular quest lines will progress as well, with or without your interaction. So, depending on how you interact with these characters and what you decide to do, the side story might have different conclusions. So, I've completed some side stories, I failed a bunch of others. But to be completely honest, I gotta say that when I was playing The Surge, I wasn't really that focused on the story. I was more focused on the gameplay. And yes, let's talk about the gameplay now, because I have a lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to the gameplay in the Surge. So first, that level design that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about visuals. The level design in this game, in my opinion, is really good. One of the problems that I had with the level design, though, is that it is so good that you're going to often get lost in these levels. That sometimes there will not be a clear direction of where you should go in order to progress. And that is where you kind of needed a bit more support from the story. Because, again, a lot of times I was a little bit lost in the story. And there are several reasons for that. One of the reasons is, again, I was focusing mostly on gameplay. But the other reason is also later down the line, this game becomes pretty challenging to the point where I was one-shot or two-shot multiple times. And at that point, you're so focused on the gameplay aspects and how am I going to get past this enemy that you don't necessarily remember why you were fighting that enemy in the first place. Yeah, that happened to me a lot. I'm not saying this is going to happen to everyone, it would happen to me, so a lot of times I would get lost in a level and I wouldn't know where am I supposed to go to progress. And the other reason for that is these overload mechanics. I'll talk about the overload mechanics a little bit later down the line. But yeah, there's these overload mechanics that will also cause a bit more confusion in the level design. Either way, beyond the level design, let's talk about combat. So I think the combat in this game is phenomenal. I think the combat is really good. I mean, it's not the best combat I've ever seen, but I think it's a really good combat system that they've come up with. The whole thing with targeting different parts of the enemies and whether or not that particular part of an enemy is armored or not is going to determine like how impactful your hit is going to be, on how you can rely on getting that second attack in or not. And it's one of those combat systems that's going to take you a bit to get used to it. And a lot of the times you'll be like, why did he stagger that one time and then he didn't stagger this one time? I don't understand what's going on. But as you play more and more, you'll understand that that particular combat system is actually predictable. So you will be able to kind of predict, okay, he's going to do this, so then I'm going to be able to counter with this. So it does work. The other really cool thing about the combat, so this is a stamina-based combat, so you got your health. Whenever you get hit, you're going to lose health. You got your stamina, so whenever you run out of stamina, you can't perform any actions like dodging or swinging and all that stuff. But there's a new resource here, which is called energy, and some games would just say, oh, that's like mana. But no, in the case of the Surge, energy is more like rage in Warriors of World of Warcraft, so to speak. Basically, it's a resource that is generated whenever you deal damage to enemies. And I find that to be kind of cool, because you don't have to be worrying about, oh, am I going to have enough mana to do this thing? No, it's like this particular resource works differently. You hit enemies, and if you're able to successfully capitalize on hitting enemies, you gain that energy, which you can then use to do other things. Now, there's this implant system that will allow you to get implants that will give you either passive bonuses like hit points, stamina, additional energy, or they might work kind of like consumables. So you might have something that consumes energy that you gain from hitting enemies to then like give you a buff on your weapon, or something that will heal you by using that energy. Or sometimes you can use that energy to have your drone perform an action like an attack or shooting a laser or freezing an enemy in place. There's several uses for energy, and that is a very interesting mechanic for me. So I was constantly playing around to see what kind of things I could do with that specific mechanic. And now you guys are thinking, okay, so you can do a lot of things with this energy stuff and all these implants. Is any of this permanent? Like, do you have respec abilities? Like, what's the deal with that? And basically, you will never have to respec in this game because your level up is pretty much the same. You don't choose a stat when you level up. You just increase your core power. And as you increase your core power, that enables you to load more implants. And those implants can be swapped at any time whenever you go to a med bay, which works kind of like the Bonfire for the Surge. Now, the cool thing about this is that basically, technically you're not respecing, you're just switching implants around. It's almost like you got sockets on your character, and as you level up, you're able to equip more of them and more powerful sockets. And the cool stuff about that is that you can choose the different aspects that you want to focus on. So like you want to have more hit points, boom, here you go. You want to have more healing potions, you got modules that give you different injectables for healing potions. So you can have more healing potions, less health. You can have more health, less healing potions, or you can have both. You can have a mix of health and healing potions. And I'm just talking about health and healing potions because there's like 1,000 other things you can do. Like you can have buffs to increase the damage of your weapons. You can have additional energy. You can have implants that increase the amount of energy you gain. You can have implants that will allow you to heal from energy that you have. You have implants that buff you passively. You have implants that, I don't know, there's like tons and tons of implants which allow for a lot of versatility when you are choosing your particular playstyle that you want to go for. And that, again, is one of the really cool things about this game. And coupled together with that, I want to bring up another point right now, which is weapon proficiency. So you know how in a lot of these Souls-like games, you usually have to pick a weapon type, and you have to kind of stick to it, because like you've been leveling up this specific stat that allows you to use this weapon with a certain degree of damage and stuff like that. And if you ever want to change weapons, it's a serious problem because that stat is not going to be there, and you're not going to scale with the same stats, and then you still have to upgrade the weapon. It's an overall pain in the ass. Well, in this game, you can use whatever weapon you want, whenever you want. The one downside to this is that whenever you use a weapon, you level up something called weapon proficiency. So that is how good you are at that particular weapon type. So if I choose to play with a hammer throughout most of the game, and then I want to swap it up and play with, say, duels, which is a weapon type here that's called twin-rigged, I can do that. And there's not like, I don't have to respec or anything like that, because the weapon will eventually scale up to the level of the hammer. The thing is, I got to practice a little bit on some of the, maybe some of the lower level enemies, even though, to be honest, I always just went for the higher level enemies anyways, even with weapons that I had no proficiency with, because proficiency kind of levels up at a reasonable pace. So it's just one of those things. Just kill a couple of enemies with that fancy new weapon that you got, and your proficiency will level up, and you can start using that weapon right away, basically. There's no downside to it. There's no like, oh, I have to respec to this thing because I'm not going to deal any damage with my current set of stats. And that's cool, because that pretty much enabled me to use all of the weapons that were available in the game, and never really feel like I don't have the appropriate weapon for this particular situation, because like, hey, if the weapon you have is not really working for you right now, just swap it up and use another one. And that was one of the really cool things about it. And another thing, again, this is something that a lot of games could learn from. The fact that I can use whatever weapon I want whenever I want. I like having that option, because I personally, a lot of times I'm playing a game and I'm like, okay, I use this weapon, I like this weapon, I feel like using a different one, you know? I want to test out something new to keep things fresh. And throughout playing through the Surge, I went on just this spree where I used up, like I said, I used all of the weapons that were available in the game. Some I like more, some I like less, but I played decent chunks of game with each of the weapon types, and I had fun with all of them. The other thing that I thought was brilliant when it came to weapons was the fact that whenever you got a boss weapon, it would already be upgraded to the current tier that you're in. So each weapon in this game has like 5 levels of upgrade that you can give it. So it's like maximum weapon power, at least as far as I could tell, is achieved at +5. Let's just call it +5. And here they call it Mark 5, but whatever. So basically, let's say I'm beating this boss and I'm using Mark II weapons. If you manage to defeat the boss, you usually will get a special weapon from that boss. And it's not something that you need to go on a crazy quest to get that weapon. It's just like, hey, this weapon was on this boss. The boss was using it. It fell off. Now it's yours. And usually those weapons will come already at the appropriate mark for you to just straight up pick up that boss weapon and start using it. And that, again, I thought was just brilliant. It was brilliant because, like, you don't want to go out and be like, oh, I got this boss weapon, but it actually sucks. I have to, like, upgrade it 15 times. I have the wrong stats. I have all these other problems. No, in this game, every time you pick up a boss weapon, you can just straight up equip that boss weapon and you're good to go. And again, that is something that enabled me to basically like, oh, I picked up this new weapon. I'm going to just use it right away. Instantly after the boss, equip the weapon, go. You're good to go. And again, that was something that I thought was amazing. Now let's talk a little bit about crafting mechanics, because that is another thing that I thought was really cool. Crafting mechanics are this is some of the best stuff that I've seen in these kind of games, because so here's the thing. Usually, what do you have in a Souls-like game whenever you want to upgrade something? There's some enemy that drops some random material, and you will want to murder that enemy like 100 times or so that you can get that material to drop so that you can then upgrade your weapon. Not on this game. On this game, because of that whole system of how you execute enemies and you can chop off different limbs and stuff like that, though that is how you get the crafting materials that you want. So say, for instance, you want a specific piece of gear, like a chest plate that you've seen that some enemy was using and you thought, oh, that chest plate looks kind of cool. I want that one. You go after that specific enemy, you find one that is armored in the chest, because sometimes the armor disposition on your enemies is different. Sometimes they'll be armored in their arms, not on their chest. Other times they'll be armored on their chest, their armor will be unarmored, and this affects combat. So whether you hit them in an armored spot or in an unarmored spot is going to mean you're going to deal more or less damage. And you're like, why wouldn't you just always hit them in the unarmored spots? Because of the crafting system. So if you want a chest plate from one of those enemies, you're going to go up to him and you're going to chop off that chest plate right off of him. So you can target different body parts when you're doing combat. So you just select the body part that you want to have. So like in this case, it would be the chest, and you hit that chest until you get the prompt for the animation where you can chop that chest off. You chop it off, you'll usually get a damaged version of that chest piece, because, I mean, let's face it, you were just banging on that thing for a while now. But that enables you to basically get the schematic, which you can then use to craft it. Now, obviously, this requires other materials. So say you're trying to build a Mark III chest plate, because chest plates upgrade just like weapons. Chest plates and any other piece of armor. So say you're making a Mark III chest plate. You find an enemy that's got that specific chest plate that you want, you get the schematic. After that, any other enemy that has any tier 3 or Mark III chest plate, you can go and you can break his chest plate and you get parts to craft the chest plate that you want. So anytime you want to upgrade arms, guess what? You're chopping enemy arms. Anytime you want to upgrade chest, you're chopping enemies' chests. You want to upgrade legs, you're chopping enemies' chests. Just make sure you're chopping the armored bits. And that is going to give you materials so that you can then craft or upgrade the parts that you want. And it works like this for the entirety of the game all the way up until Mark IV. Mark V is a little bit more complex, and we'll get to that later on. But basically, it's like you find those enemies that have the gear that you want and you chop it off, and it's one of those things where, in my opinion, it is much better than like, oh, this enemy has a chance of dropping this. Like 8 times out of 10, if you succeed in chopping something, you will usually get the material that you want, as opposed to 2 times out of 10, which is usually what happened in games like this where you have to farm for things. So that was a really cool thing. It enabled me to basically upgrade my stuff as I was going on. And now you guys are wondering, what about weapons? What do you do about weapons? Well, weapons, you chop off their right arm, which is usually the arm that is wielding the weapon, the main arm that wields weapons, because everybody in the future is right-handed. I mean, come on. But you chop off the right arm, you will usually get parts for upgrading your weapon appropriate to the level of enemies that you are fighting. And again, the crafting system, I cannot compliment it enough. The crafting system, the fact that boss weapons already come fully upgraded and ready to go as you pick them up off the boss's corpses, all of that stuff is genius. And I had a really great experience with the crafting system. But then there's always a but. The big but when it comes to this kind of stuff is that there's a problem right now in the game. In my opinion, that is a problem. I'm not sure if this was a design decision or what the deal was. But basically, this game relies a lot on armor sets. And I was not aware of this. So basically, I would see a specific armor piece that I would like to say, oh, this armor piece gives me impact and attack speed or something like that. And you're like, okay, I want that, as opposed to having this other armor piece that doesn't give attack speed and only gives impact or gives negative attack speed and gives more armor. So ideally, what would you do? You'd go like through all these armor pieces and you'd be like, okay, I want this one and then a piece of this one. So you'd end up with, I want the legs of Lynx and I want the arms of Rhino and I want the head of Cerberus because it does all of these stats that I want. The problem is that the game at no point, at least to me, at no point it explained to me that, hey, you know, if you craft the full armor set, you're actually going to get a bonus. And then I was like, I was told this through chat as I was live streaming the game. So chat told me, yeah, if you craft the full set, you're going to get a bonus. And then I was like, well, where do I see what that bonus is? And the answer is you don't. You have to craft the full set of armor and then see what that bonus is for yourself. And I thought that is just... that is a bad... And it actually backfired on me because I was like, oh, so I see this elite hazard set, right? I figured this hazard set is like a hazard suit, so maybe it will enable me to go to these areas where there's poison fumes and stuff in the game. So I'm going to craft this set. And I finished crafting the set, and the set bonus actually said, oh, this thing changes one of your drone abilities to deal poison damage. And I was like, what? That's not what I wanted at all. So it's like the sets themselves not telling you what they do before you craft the full thing and invest scrap, which is the equivalent of souls, invest parts, invest all of these things to craft a full set of armor, and then find out that it doesn't exactly do what you wanted it to do. I can see that being really frustrating. Now, I was very lucky because the first set that I decided to craft actually gave me a stat that I really wanted. So I was like, oh, cool beans. I didn't look it up. I just lucked out. I was like, I want to have this particular armor set. I don't even like the way it looks all that much, but I think the one reason that made me craft that set was because I liked the bonuses that the chest piece had. So I was like, well, I'll just build a whole set because I like the bonuses on this chest piece. And I ended up having a really cool set that I enjoyed the tier bonus of, but it wasn't always like that. And I kind of feel like you should be able to look at a piece of a set and it should tell you, if you craft the full set, here's what the effects are going to be. Because without that, it's going to be very hard for people to make their decisions without going online to wikis to check what each of the set does and all this other stuff, right? I also felt that some of the combat mechanics could have been better explained. So like, for instance, the nature of blocking, because the first time that you play this game, you're going to try to block and you're going to be like, wow, this is the most useless thing ever. I'm never going to use this. Well, let me tell you right now, you'll want to master blocking and you'll want to do it fast. Blocking in this game works kind of like parrying, so you have to block at the right time and that'll enable you to perform counters on your enemies. It doesn't work like, oh, you can just hold block up and keep blocking attacks. No, you got to use it like a parry, and after you master it, you're actually going to have to master it to deal with certain enemies. So I would advise you, yeah, try to master that block if you're going to be playing this game. Now let's talk. So this item sets thing, to me, that is a problem, and it's easily solvable. Just type in, if you complete this set, here's the bonus that you're going to get, and that will fix all of those problems. The other problem that I have with the game is the overload mechanic. So there are these areas as you are navigating the levels where you will have to overload certain circuits, and this requires you to have a certain amount of core power. Now this is fine. Usually by the time you get to these places, you will be well above the core power required to overload them. So it's never really a problem of like, oh, I've got to this place and the core power is too high. I can't overload, now I'm stuck here. That never really happens. But what happens is these overload things are not always close to the door that you're trying to open, or to basically you'll have to overload something which sometimes might be in a different location of the map, and figuring out what your overload just did is not particularly easy or intuitive. At least in my opinion, it wasn't. So like sometimes I'd run into some overload thing and I would overload it and then I'd be like, what did I do? I have no idea what the hell I just did. And it would take me hours to figure out what I did. Sometimes it would take me minutes because I would instantly see, oh, okay, this is what I did. Other times I would just not figure it out and keep moving on. So that overload mechanic, in my opinion, could use maybe, I don't know, maybe some hints of what exactly you just did. Like, I remember this one time I overloaded something and it said, oh, the exhibition things are now unlocked. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There wasn't anything locked on the exhibition thing. I don't understand. And then I had to go back and figure out that, like, oh, this opened up this one box on this, in the middle of this big location. I don't know, it's weird with that overload mechanic thing. Again, I love the level design, but this overload thing can become a little bit problematic. Another thing with these overload things is that you, from time to time, you'll find these boxes, and they will usually be like, these are boxes that you can also overload, but you won't be able to overload them the first time you lay eyes on them. My advice to you is note down the location of where you saw that box, because you're going to need it later on. So these boxes will have like a big number. So like, say for instance, you'll be level 10. This happens on the very first level. You'll be like level 10 and you'll find a box that's like core power 55. And you're like, what? I need to be level 55 to open this box? What's the deal here? And those boxes contain end game materials to upgrade your stuff to Mark 5. And that is kind of weird, because, like, you know, constantly encountering things that you can't actually open in front of you, I wasn't a big fan of that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I was just like, what do you mean? This thing is right here. Why can't I open it? Frustrating. And then as you are getting close to endgame, which in my case, I think I was at the last level when I finally went back to look for these boxes, and then I was like, oh, now I have to go from one end of the game to the other end of the game to pick up this box because I'm going to need it to upgrade my equipment. Not the best of experiences. And then comes the game's biggest problem, and that is damage scaling. And I'm not talking about your damage scaling. Your damage scaling is usually fine if you keep up with the upgrades on your weapon and stuff like that. So long as you maintain it at the same tier as the enemies that you are fighting, usually you'll be fine. I haven't had many problems with the damage that I deal to enemies. The problem is the other way around, the damage that enemies deal to you. So I think it was about the last third of the game. So like, if I was to split the game in 3 parts, the last third of the game was spent mostly, every death that I would have would either be a 1-shot or a 2-shot. So enemies would kill me in 1 or 2 hits. And my armor would be fully upgraded. It would be fully good to go. And I was wearing medium armor, I think, because the stability stat said medium, so I'm assuming it was medium armor. So I wasn't like the heaviest of armors in the game, but like, it felt so punishing every time that I would make one mistake and I would take 1 hit. I mean, we're not talking about playing a New Game Plus here. This is regular game. This game also has New Game Plus. And it's like, 1 hit would like cleave my health in half, sometimes would just flat out kill me. And I thought that was too much. It was way too much for a large section of the game. Particularly those of you who watch me on Twitch, you guys will remember a specific boss fight. Again, I'm not going to give you guys details on boss fights, where I just spent hours going in there and getting like 2-shot repeatedly, which meant that for the last 2 bosses of the game, my strategy consisted of basically equipping myself with as many health implants as possible to just get a really big health pool to prevent enemies from one-shotting. So I just basically became this health pool tank. So I wouldn't even have the best armor in the game to be like super tanky, but I would have like some of the most highest HPs you would see, and then I would just be like a bunch of HP and a bunch of potions, which kind of sucked in my opinion, because like, I wanted to use those energy implants that I told you guys about, which would modify things that you could do, like increase your damage, like heal yourself through energy, all of these things. I wanted to play around with the energy system, and I ended up barely using it because pretty much all of the time I'd be like health and health potions so that I wouldn't die in 1 hit. As a matter of fact, as you guys see the playthrough, and you guys will get to the ending bits of the playthrough, you will see me just tank through stuff like that will hit me and my health will go like to 20%, and then I will just put that health right back up again by shooting myself up with potions. And that is going to be a big part of my strategy at the end of the game, which in my opinion kind of goes against this deep combat system that they have, which is really fun and satisfying to engage in. But then it's like, you really shouldn't experiment that much with it, because you make one mistake and the enemies are going to punish you hard. And again, I told you guys that, for instance, the blocking mechanic I felt wasn't properly explained. That wouldn't be a big problem, because I would be able to experiment with that mechanic if I wasn't getting 1/2 two-shotted by enemies for a large portion of my playthrough. So like, I'd be going up against enemies and I'm like, I really should practice my blocking. And then I would mess up because I'm trying to practice, trying to understand their moveset and figure out when I can't block. And then you just get instantly punished because, like, you shouldn't have blocked this one. Guess what? That means you're dead. You know, it's like, I kind of felt like there were a lot of mechanics there that near the end, particularly, that were just like too many one-shot mechanics. And I would be surprised if the game isn't patched to reduce damage in the last third of the game. So bear that in mind, because like I'm talking about what I've played, which was the very first version that was made available to streamers and stuff like that. So if the game is patched afterwards, and all of the stuff that I'm talking about now makes no sense, all the better. But just remember that I was playing the version where everyone was getting one shot and stuff. But yeah, so overall, my opinions on The Surge is I think this is a great game. It does a lot of really, really cool things, but it is severely hampered by the fact that the enemy damage that I've had on my experience, the enemy damage that I've received at the latter third of the game was just too much. It was ridiculously overwhelming to the point where I just broke down. I was like, okay, health on all my implants, just friggin' health all over the place, health potions all over the place, and that was it. That was my build. It was health and health potions and just tank everything with your face, which wasn't the most fun thing. Like, I almost feel like I had more fun in the first 2/3 of the game because I was able to experiment with the energy and do all these fun things, and then towards the end of the game I kind of felt like I was funneled into just building hit points so that I can survive these crazy enemies that are dealing just like ridiculous amounts of damage. And bear something in mind, which is an enemy dealing a ridiculous amount of damage is actually okay. It is not a problem so long as the enemy telegraphs that and gives you time to react to it. The problem is that a lot of the times these hits would come out of nowhere. Like, there's a specific section in the game where there will be monsters that do this particular combo with two elements, where you'll be fighting something, then all of a sudden you'll just hear a little explosion and you're gone, like full health to nothing, and you'll have, because the enemy could be across the map shooting things at you and you will just explode. There were times where there were drones that would self-destruct themselves and you get one shot by that as well. So like, I'd be fighting this enemy and in the middle of me triggering an execution animation, the drone would begin a self-destruct sequence. By the time I'm out of the animation, I'm spamming dodge, like dodge. The drone explodes just as the animation ends and I'm dead. This happened more than once. You can watch the, I mean, maybe not the playthrough because I'm going to edit a lot of the deaths out, but if you go watch the live streams, you'll see me just like die repeatedly to mechanics like that. So that's the game's problems. That's the only flaws that I see in the game, is how much damage the enemies deal to you near the end stage. It becomes very, very frustrating. And I would be surprised if they don't patch that stuff out. But anyway, that's my opinion on The Surge. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, comments, feedback in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.